We're live here with Charlie Cano of Etex in today's ViodiTV Real-Time Conversation. And Charlie, welcome to our episode here. It's going to be interesting as we talk about what's going on in rural Texas.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ken. It's a pleasure.
So, I'm wondering if everything's working technically. Are you seeing, I see my camera's off, which is probably good because it looks much better with just a still shot of me. But that was the pre-pandemic hair. So now I'm in the post-pandemic hair. So Charlie, again, welcome to the show. Today's show is brought to you by Calix, a longtime supporter of ViodiTV, and appreciate that. And we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in your neck of the woods. And why don't we start with that? We're going to talk about education, some of the things you're doing there. But let's first talk about Etex and where you guys are located.
Well, I've got a little bit of graphics here that may help us explain some of that. And so Etex is located in the northeast corner of Texas. And we originally started, the green outline is our cooperative exchange boundary. And so that's our service territory as designated and defined by the Public Utility Commission. And we have had a good opportunity to expand. You see the red lines are our expanded fiber footprint that are connecting to, and in this particular graphic, it shows schools that we're connecting to. Right now, we're connected to 28 schools and a couple of colleges that we provide fiber optic broadband connectivity to. So we've gone from 710 square miles to over 3,700 square miles of territory that we cover. And so again, our ILEC, our cooperative is the green outline territory, but we've expanded quite a bit to some of these other areas. As far as kind of get an idea of not only where we're located, you see the graphic shows you the kind of services that we offer: technical support, internet, VoIP, that sort of thing, IPTV. Right now, we're about 47% fiber optics that we've overbuilt and replaced copper plant with. We still got a ways to go. And we have a little bit of a fixed wireless LTE connections to, not in our ILEC territory, but some of our CLEC territories that are just outside of our reach. Just kind of give you an idea of what it looks like out here. We have a lot of trees. Wireless doesn't work very well. Not only cellular wireless, but also satellite. Cable TV doesn't work very well in these areas. You can see that the trees are pretty tall. 80 foot in some areas, and so they really cause a lot of havoc for wireless signals. And right here in this graphic, if you look down in the middle, you can kind of see one of our fiber pedestals and markers that's feeding a house somewhere behind those trees. So just kind of give you an idea of what our territory looks like.
It's very remote, very rural. I imagine one of the things I found interesting is, and this will be a theme as we go forward, is the fact that you're interconnecting those schools as far as your expansion out from your initial co-op area.
Yeah, some of those schools are in a consortium, so we're connecting them together through a fiber ring, and so they're kind of supporting or backing each other up. And other schools are just linear connections where we went in and competed against their existing incumbent provider, and we're able to sell them on better service and better support.
And so those become kind of anchor institutions, I assume, to expand outward?
Definitely. They do become anchor institutions. A lot of the schools that we connected, then we were able to connect the municipalities, the city councils, the county seeds in some of these other areas. So it's definitely, we use that as anchor institutions that allow us to expand and also connect to other commercial properties.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the structure of the co-op and then talk about you. But first, let's talk about the co-op, because a lot of people in urban areas, it's a foreign concept to them.
So the co-op was created, probably people are more familiar with electric co-ops. So telephone co-ops are very similar in the form that were created out in rural areas that were not served by the bigger companies. And so the reason for the existence of Etex, I think around 68 years ago, was created by a handful of people and with the help of the state subsidies that were used to create a rural network, telephone network. And so again, that's where the definition of the exchange boundary that you showed or that I showed you earlier, and just based off feeding and serving areas that are underserved or not served by the bigger companies.
So it seems like your story fits very well into a cooperative mindset, and especially a rural mindset with agriculture and so forth. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Charlie Cano and your, humble beginnings in northern Texas?
Yeah, definitely love sharing my personal story. I was born and raised in Perryton, Texas. It's in the very top panhandle of the state. 2 hours north of Amarillo, not even 45 minutes from the Kansas border, across the Oklahoma panhandle, just to kind of give perspective of how far away, and how long that is to how big the state is. But grew up, always lived in the country, grew up farming and ranching, helping my dad and helping my parents work cattle, drive tractor, do enough of that hard work to know that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. So that inspired me to go to college and get an engineering degree, but definitely had very humble beginnings. And so I'm very connected with rural America and the mindset and just the neighborly perspective of taking care of each other.
When you were a kid, were there many role models? Because you have a degree in electrical engineering, and I imagine there weren't a lot of electrical engineers where you lived.
Definitely none that I remember. I older brothers, and they were really more my role models. My parents didn't even get a high school education, let alone a college education. So we were the first generation that reached out into that level. My older brothers did get into engineering. One was electrical engineering technology, and another one was computer science. So they opened the door for my interest in the technical field.
And you graduated and started, I think, at Hicks-Ragland. Is that right?
That's right. So I graduated from Texas Tech University with electrical engineering and a minor in math. Hicks-Ragland is an engineering firm that was based out of Lubbock. It's since merged with some cost consulting company and created CHR Solutions. That is still a version of that is still around today.
Yeah.
And so I got my humble beginning there in this industry. I started out as an engineer working for and doing designs for telecommunications companies all over the Southwest, from Louisiana to Arizona and everywhere in between. So a lot of the telcos here in Texas, I'm very familiar with. I'm very good friends with a lot of the managers, because at some point I was, again, their engineer, their project manager, or their account manager that was helping them through their challenges. So I really owe a lot of the success that I have through that beginning. I've learned a lot from my peers and from my mentors. And so I attribute a lot of the success that Etex has gained and grown just based on that background.
Well, and it seems like you're also doing the same for others. And I think that's, what prompted this call was I saw this video I think you put on LinkedIn. And I thought, wow, that is really a good video. It really captures the essence. And so we'll talk about that video, but one of the things that stuck out was the term that was used in it, digitally disadvantaged. And that was a new term for me. So why don't you explain what that means?
Well, I think you're referring to the typical term everybody is using as a digital divide. The news media and everybody is just throwing that out there. And to me, digital divide is kind of a negative term. Because it points a finger, it points blame towards an industry, maybe the service providers, that it's using a negative connotation that they haven't done their job. They haven't provided broadband connections everywhere. Although the job is definitely not done. My company, as well as all the others in the US, have a long way to go to provide further connectivity. It's not where all the blame is. It's not where all the reason is. So when you look at a disadvantage, it challenges you to dive deeper into, well, why is there a disadvantage? What's going on? Is there actual facilities available at that household, but the family may not have the means to pay for for a $35 or a $50 internet connection, because they're just working multiple jobs and just trying to get by. Or, in other cases, their priorities are aligned differently. Their priorities may not be on the educational space. They may be spending 3 times the money on different forms of entertainment. And so, I call it a disadvantage, because sometimes the disadvantage is self-inflicted by some of these families. And so I want to challenge the regulators, and I want to challenge some of these third-party map makers that are charting all of this, to tell the whole story. Don't just say that, well, providers aren't building the network. We are, and the job's not done, but let's look at the full picture.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing, because it's really easy to get focused on one stat and even actually kind of mislabel it, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I guess I'll steal a term that's being very common right now. It's just fake news, and we need to correct it.
Well, in your area, I remember also hearing in the video that something like 80% of your students are economically disadvantaged, right?
Definitely, if you were to do some additional research on this county and surrounding counties, there's definitely a low income average on these families, and they definitely are economically disadvantaged. And so that brings in a more challenging part of the equation to try to connect these families.
Well, in something, a term that was introduced again in there, I think it's known probably in the education circles, but probably not too far outside that, this whole idea of the summer slide, and how, people who aren't, their kids aren't hearing as many words, right? They get left behind, right?
Definitely, and that's a term that we learned as we sat down and talked to our local schools within our coverage area, and them educating us on, hey, what are their challenges, and what are they trying to do and accomplish in order just to do their job and educate our kids and grandchildren. And so, yes, understanding that summer slide, and then going back and determining, well, how can we help that? How can we partner? And so this conversation started many years ago, and we finally got to an idea that felt that we could do something about, and so we started that project.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if I made it clear, but the summer slide is just this idea that you're out of school, and then after a couple months of not learning or being in school, the stuff you learned, you forgot, and you have to relearn, right?
Definitely, and again, that goes back to the families. It puts a lot of the pressure on the parents. It puts a lot of pressure on the kids. We know, and I know that me as a kid, I never was going to be sitting down and reading, as opposed to going outside and playing basketball.
Right. Watching TV or
pressure back on the parents. And that's just not the reality. There's so many distractions out there. Again, working parents or being pulled in so many different directions. So we needed to develop a program that had some sort of incentive, so maybe we could captivate the parents' focus as well as the kids to try to do something online for education purposes.
Well, why don't you tell us about that program and the education credits and so forth? How does it work?
Well, the way that it works, once we understood the summer slide and what it meant, we started brainstorming with the superintendents and the administrators at Gilmer Independent School District. And first of all, a lot of credit goes out to them, for them to step up and reaching out and trusting us to sit down and try to work through this project. And so we felt that some sort of incentive had to be put together. And the only way that we know how to incentivize is to give, you either give money, you make money, or you give credits. And so we thought that if the school, using their database, and it's information that we don't need to know, we don't get into any of that other than they have their database, identify who the families are and children that need this help and support based on their historical scores, and bring that list to us. And then we cross-reference that list and determine, do we have facilities there? Are they already a customer? Or do they live outside our coverage area? Because, our coverage area and their district does not perfectly overlap or match up. And so some families were outside of our coverage area that we really couldn't do anything about. But for those that met the criteria, then we applied a $34. Again, if they were a new customer, we installed it for free. and gave them the minimal package, the minimum of $34. If they're an existing customer and already subscribed to a higher tier, well, then they got $34 off of that. When we didn't stop there, because we know that there's teachers that have to be involved to hold these kids and hold these families accountable. So what we did is we also gave a credit to these teachers as a reward and as a thank you for the heroes, the true heroes of this story, are, you know, the educators going above and beyond and trying to enforce, you know, if I'm saying it so boldly, enforce this kind of summertime curriculum.
So what was the curriculum itself? I mean, did they kind of have like fun lessons and things like that, or?
Well, another thing that the school provided is they did provide the tablets or the laptops for these families to take home. So we were just the connection, the internet connection. But yes, they had an online program and they had some online content where they had to check in. I don't know the full details, but they did have their own prepackaged curriculum of, hey, you got to read so much, you got to do so many problems. And they had to check in with those instructors to make sure that they were on target.
So the teachers were more kind of like advisors versus, you know, a daily, class type thing.
They were advisors, and I think they also would meet at a neutral location, you know, just trying to keep it safe for all parties. They would meet at a neutral location at some times, but mostly it was remote supervision.
And then the credit itself, they had to hit the milestones to get that credit, right?
So they had to hit the milestones because, again, I've said it in a couple of other videos. We're happy to partner with schools and we're happy to provide internet for educational purposes, but we're not going to give that away for entertainment purposes. So if the families and the student were not utilizing that properly, we were not going to be the bad guys. We're going to let the teachers, you know, police that for us. And so if they identified a family that was not turning in their assignment, or a student that wasn't turning in their assignments or following through with curriculum, they would then kick that back out to us and we would remove that credit.
That makes sense. And I want to talk about the pandemic or the shutdown, but before we get there, moving forward, because you started this well before the pandemic, I think last summer, but moving forward, what sort of barriers do you see to, you know, either this program the way it is now or expanding it to other school districts and locations?
Like any business, like any other organization, the barriers are always money. And so, you know, one of the barriers that we have is, I mentioned earlier how we're a cooperative, we're rural, we depend on universal service funds that are managed and regulated by the Public Utility Commission. And those funds are in jeopardy of running out. And the PUC is not taking the steps forward to try to correct that formula. And the reason is, you know, that was designed to support a telephone network. And the reality is that it did enable us to build a telephone network. But like any engineer and any technical person would tell you, well, you're going to use the latest and greatest technology on building a network. And so when building the network, we use fiber optics, which happen to lend itself to carry other services like broadband and video and that sort of thing. And so what that would mean for us, if they were to cut off Universal Service Fund, the monies that we get from that help us support the telephone network go away. Therefore, we start using the money that we get from broadband business units to subsidize for the maintenance and repair of any of the telephone side. So if I now have to take money out of my right pocket to help out my left pocket, I'm no longer spending it on broadband expansions.
Right.
And so for that other 48% that are still copper out there, they're waiting for me to get fiber to them, I have to slow down my operations, my capital expansion by 30% on a good year. That's if all my other business units are doing well. If I don't have a not so good year, I may reduce that to 60%.
Wow.
So that's how it would affect our broadband expansion and our broadband growth. You know, again, we're not using USF for broadband installations. We're using it to support the telephone network. But if I have to cross subsidize, that's how it's going to hurt us.
Yeah, and that is so important because copper, I mean, you've got the maintenance issues, but you just can't push the bandwidth through in those rural areas where you are like you can with fiber, right? There's no comparison.
Well, we're so spread out. When you have 7 houses per mile of facilities, and we have 710 square miles, you get to the point where you're just too far away from a electronic cabinet for the copper signal to have any decent kind of speed. So, the solution is you have to either put more equipment closer to the home, which even if you do that, you have to put more fiber closer to that equipment to feed that equipment. While you're there, you might as well drop a fiber into the house and make it more of a future-proof solution instead of just patching, with a Band-Aid. Yeah,
not to mention the reliability just increases if you just basically have 2 endpoints versus a bunch of little ones in between, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And especially, I'd imagine in Texas, you probably have decent lightning out there, don't you?
Oh, we have a lot of storms. We have a lot of rainfall here in East Texas, and with that, a lot of lightning. So it isn't uncommon to have a lot of power outages almost on a monthly basis, the different parts of our territory. So with that, lightning strikes, it's going to affect the copper pedestal a lot more than it affects the fiber optic pedestal, because it just doesn't transfer that as easily as copper does.
So you've got a network out there, you've got this summer program, and then all of a sudden March hits and we're shutting down, and schools are shutting down. How did this, what you'd already developed, your relationships with the schools, translate then into kind of this online world during the regular year?
Well, definitely that I'd like to say that I was predicting this, but I definitely wasn't. But just the foundation, it created a good foundation. The number one foundation was that trust and that open communication between us and the school districts. And for them to be able to reach out to us and say, hey, what can we do for those that already have connections? What can we do that it's too costly to create a connection quickly? So how can we create some Wi-Fi hotspots in different parts of the county so we can do a quick fix on that while we're still trying to expand our network? So it definitely took the same model, and now we're just expanding it to try to connect more families. And the formula isn't perfect yet, but it's definitely a great start compared to no start at all. And so we're hoping that other school districts and maybe even the state of Texas kind of looks at this as a model to say, you know what, we need to partner with our local and regional providers, the ones that are already out there, the ones that have already laid the foundation. Let's partner with them instead of reinventing the wheel, and let's try to get more connections out there. So I look at it as it's not the ultimate solution, but it's definitely a good start. And again, it's based on partnerships and trust and open communication.
Well, and those things aren't established overnight, right? It comes from being in the community. I mean, I saw, you're working with churches, various groups, obviously the schools, but it seems like that's a big part of it.
Well, and the other, that's a very good point. That's a big part of the message as well is, we're rural, and there's not very many other companies like us to offer this service in this particular area, but it doesn't mean that we take it for granted. It doesn't mean that we're not day in and day out trying to earn that business and earn that respect, because again, we go to church, we go to school, we're connected with the community. So even though like I mentioned, we still have some room to grow, I'd like to feel that I can walk into the community with my head up high, that the Etex employees are doing everything that they can to keep these connections going.
Well, and you actually you literally have to walk into your annual meeting and face the members, right? So how have the members felt about some of these efforts that go above and beyond connecting the schools and doing the other things you do?
Everybody is very supportive of every community outreach that we do and all of these projects that we're doing to connect more families. But honestly, everybody's also, when am I going to get it? So if there's any negative aspect to it, is the ones that we haven't reached yet. And so the best that I can tell them is, you're not forgotten. We have a plan. We're going to get to you. But I would be the same way if I was 7 miles out of town and still on a 10 meg connection, and I want a 200 meg connection, I'd be frustrated too. And I get that. I understand that. But they're very supportive. They understand that we're definitely partnering with as many people and entities that we can. So it's a good mix of, hey, I'm glad to see what you're doing out there, but hurry up and get to me.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge, right? Because this isn't like software where you can just upload it to GitHub and suddenly whatever. But here you're building stuff, right?
Exactly. That's right.
And the thing, you're also involved with, I mean, you're not the only one in Texas like this, right? There's a bunch of independent operators. You're involved with the Texas Telephone Cooperative Association. Is that the one?
Yes, I'm involved with the Texas Telephone Association. And again, I'm glad you mentioned that. We're just one of many companies. I take a lot of feedback from,
sorry about that.
You're fine. We're one of many companies that are very innovative, very connected with the community. And so I love sitting down with my peers, other CEOs and general managers across the state and hear what they've done, that they inspire me to do some of these things. And as well as we hope that we inspire them on some of these projects as well. So we're just one of a large group of independent telephone providers in Texas that are very like-minded.
Well, and it shows by the networks and the things you guys do. Going back to kind of that whole community thing and understanding the community because you're part of it, why don't you tell us about the video itself and the person you tapped to kind of be the producer of it, and clearly the on-air talent. It was a remarkable video.
Yes, very excited about that. One of the things that we're very proud of is the opportunity that we have to hire a lot of summer interns here, and we usually grab kids that are just graduated from high school and going into their college. And then even through their first 2 years of college, we'll keep them on board. And so we're very fortunate to be able to do that for these kids, to kind of teach them, hey, this is what it's like to work in a team environment, have full job responsibilities, not just making copies. They when they come to Etex, as much as we can, we get them involved in all the software, answering phones, and kind of get them out of their shell when it comes to being shy or not dealing with the public. And so being in rural community and being a small community, we all know who's who. We all know, who their families are and who their friends are. And that's a great opportunity for us to understand and identify where some talent is and where just some good homegrown kids are. And so Rayleigh, the individual you mentioned on the video, she's a very sharp girl that has graduated from Harmony High School, which is where my daughter goes. So I was familiar with her just because of playing sports with my daughter and those kinds of things. So whenever her mom reached out about a potential job opportunity, I got to evaluating just her history and what I've seen of her demeanor. And I've always wanted to grow a marketing team here at Etex, but I never could find the right fit. I guess it's kind of like one of those Star Wars movies. I know what I want to build, but I don't have the technology to make it yet. So I've had these visions for quite a while. And when Rayleigh stepped up and asked for a summer internship, I thought, this may be the perfect individual to help us on these projects. And she just hit it out of the park. She's done amazing. She's been very well received by all of the community. Her friends and family are super proud of her as well as I am, and just helped us deliver the story the way it needed to be delivered.
Yeah, no, it was good, very professionally done, and heck, I thought she was graduate of college. She says she's a 20. I'm giving away the ending. I probably shouldn't do that, but
definitely just fresh out of high school.
Yeah, it's remarkable, but and it's something that I recommend everyone watch because that provides a really good perspective and some great footage of the surrounding area too. And one of the things that was that I noticed, it's not here. You've got some great pictures behind you and so forth, but in that video there was a image of a book called, I believe, The Patriot's Guide to Success.
The Patriot's Guide to Success. Yes, that's a fun milestone, a fun project that I'm very proud of. So there's a local university in Tyler, which is about 45 minutes away from here, and it's the University of Texas at Tyler. And we talked about how much we've communicated with the anchor institutions and trying to partner with them. Well, we had a good opportunity, and I got to host the president, Dr. Tidwell of UT Tyler, and he and his team took a tour of Etex a few years ago, and was very impressed with our operations, and was very impressed on how we deliver our services and the culture here, that he invited me to be part of the university in a couple of different capacities. One, I've had an opportunity to be on the advisory council for the College of Engineering. There's another committee that I'm part of with UT Tyler as well. And one of the fun projects was he and his team came up with a really cool idea to publish a book. And this book was published by UT Tyler. They reached out to I'm trying to remember the number, but probably about 30, 40-ish local, regional CEOs and community leaders. And the mission was this: they wanted to create a book that they're going to hand to all their graduates. And it's a guide to what would you want to tell somebody fresh out of college, lessons learned, how to be successful, what have you learned that you want to pass down to that next generation. And so I love the title of the book because the mascot for UT Tyler is the Patriots. Right. So I love that. Just sounds amazing to me. Yeah. So the Patriots Guide to Success. So what I did is I have given a lot of leadership presentations at the national conventions in TCA and also some state conventions. And every time I get a chance to speak, I always try to give some kind of a takeaway, some kind of something that you can walk away with. So when I was asked to be part of this book, I thought, well, what can I do? What can I guide these kids in? And also going back to my engineering nerdy grassroots, that I really did a lot of work with calculus and integral formulas and that sort of thing. So I created this crazy formula to define the value factor of being successful. So I'll go ahead and read it to you. I know it's up on the screen, but I'll read it to you.
You should, yeah.
A successful person's value comes from realizing that the professional focus should be constant from the beginning to the end, from the day you're hired through retirement. Once hired, 3 things develop your success. First, we all graduate with a skill that translates to our work performance. It is what you bring to the table. Add to that a double dose of grit, which is the fire, your background, challenges, motivators, that inspires you to get an education and evolve. Everyone has a story, something that inspires us to the next level. The grit also represents your potential to grow. We're never done learning. A significant companion to grit is treating your fellow man with respect, honor, and integrity. That goes a long way, both at the beginning and the end of your career. Finally, understand that the person that you are today will not be the same in the future. You don't want to be. Do not resist change, for it will decrease your entire value factor. So I just kind of spelled out that formula down in the bottom. And so again, it's just my quirky humor on delivering a message and tying it back to my engineering roots.
It's excellent. Performance plus grit squared plus the golden rule divided by resistance to change. But it looks like it's an integral, and I can't quite read the
integral, the way that works is the bottom number is where the start, and the top number is the finish. And so it's your hire date. Your hire date is your start.
I can't read
in retirement. Yeah, and retirement is when you stop, performing as far as on a job, responsibilities.
Oh, that's great. You explained it. I gave everyone the preview on the tweet that you'd be explaining that. That was an excellent explanation. So
again, it's one of those things that I'm proud of. And again, coming from humble beginnings and to be able to be published in the book and to give, kind of pass it forward to whoever will read, probably the 2 people that have read this book, they'll at least get a laugh out of that. But yes, very proud to have been part of that. And I thank Dr. Tidwell and UT Tyler for inviting me to do that.
Well, it's a great, you're a great American success story. It's really cool to learn a little bit more about how you got to where you are and how you're passing it on to future generations. So,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you having me on this video interview. One of the things that I'm definitely inspired to do is just create opportunities to deliver that message, and also to explain who we are as a service provider, as a company. I mentioned earlier about the potential barriers through the Public Utility Commission's decisions, and legislators and regulators. We just want a seat at the table. We just want the opportunity to sit down and be able to share our story, share our successes, and be part of the formula and not be left out. And so, I understand that regulators and legislators have a tough job, and they only know what they know. Right. And if, I think I mentioned to you on a previous conversation that I grew up listening to Paul Harvey, and he delivers the rest of the story on the radio. And so I just feel that a lot of people, they just need to hear the rest of the story. Yeah. And so I appreciate you having me on here so I can share the rest of the story from Etex's perspective.
Well, thanks again for being here. And actually, there's probably a number of threads that I'd like to continue at some future date if you're interested. I mean, 5G, you talked a little bit about your wireless stuff. I'd love to talk about that. And I think there's all kinds of fodder for future conversations if you're interested.
You bet. I'll be happy to help out.
Well, super. Well, I appreciate that. And I'm going to hit the end stream. There we go. Okay, I think it worked. It was 36